Mort, Part 7. Kaylee had been to official functions in Ankh-Morpork and had met senior wizards from Unseen University, the Disc's premier college of magic. Some of them had been tall, and most of them had been fat. Nearly all of them had been richly dressed, or at least what they thought was richly dressed. In fact, there are fashions in wizardry as in more mundane arts, and this tendency to look like elderly aldermen was only temporary. Previous generations had gone in for looking pale and interesting, or druidical and grubby, or mysterious and saturnine. But Qa'Rajh was used to wizards as a sort of fur-trimmed small mountain with a wheezy voice, and Igneous Cotwell did not fit that image. He was young, well, that couldn't be helped, presumably even wizards had to start off young. He didn't have a beard, and the only thing his rather grubby robe was trimmed with was frayed edges. "Would you like a drink or something?" he said, surreptitiously kicking a discarded vest in under a table. Kaylee looked for somewhere to sit that wasn't occupied with laundry or used crockery and shook her head. Cotwell noticed her expression. It's a bit al fresco, I'm afraid," he added hurriedly, elbowing the remains of a garlic sausage onto the floor. "Miss Nugent usually comes in twice a week and does for me, but she's gone to see her sister who has had one of her turns. Are you sure? It's no trouble. I saw a spare cup here only yesterday." "I have a problem, Mr. Cotwell," said Keeley. "Hang on a minute." He reached up to a hook over the fireplace and took down a pointy hat that had seen better days, although from the look of it they hadn't been very much better, and then said, "All right then, fire away. What's so important about the hat?" Oh, that is very essential. You've got to have a proper hat for wizarding. We wizards know about this sort of thing." "If you say so. Look, can you see me?" He peered at her. Yes, I would definitely say I can see you. "And hear me. Then would you be surprised if I told you that no one else in this city can? Except me?" Qa'Rajh snorted. "And your door knocker?" Cotwell pulled out a chair and sat down. He squirmed a little. A thoughtful expression passed over his face. He stood up, reached behind him, and produced a flat, reddish mass which might once have been half a pizza. He stared at it sorrowfully. The first pizza on the disc was created by the Klatchian mystic Ron Revelation Joe Shuwadi, who claimed to have been given the recipe in a dream by the creator of the Discworld himself, who had apparently added that it was what he had intended all along. Those desert travelers who had seen the original, which is reputedly miraculously preserved in the forbidden city of E, say that what the creator had in mind then was a fairly small cheese and pepperoni affair with a few black olives, and things like mountains and seas got added out of last-minute enthusiasm, as so often it happens. After the schism of the Turnwise Ones and the death of some 25,000 people and the ensuing jihad, the faithful were allowed to add one small bay leaf to the recipe. "Of course not. I just feel angry, so I want you to tell my fortune." "Well, I don't know about that. It all sounds rather medical to me, and I can pay." It's illegal, you see," said Cotwell wretchedly. "The old king expressly forbade fortune-telling in Stolad. He didn't like wizards much. I can pay a lot." "Mrs. Nugent was telling me this new girl is likely to be worse, a right haughty one," she said. "Not the sort to look kindly on practitioners of the subtle arts, I fear." Qa'Rajh smiled. Members of the court who had seen that smile before would have hastened to drag Cotwell out of the way and into a place of safety like the next continent, but he just sat there trying to pick bits of mushrooms out of his robe. "I understand she's got a foul temper on her," said Keeley. "I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't turn you all out of the city anyway." "Oh dear," said Cotwell. Do you really think so?" "Look," said Keeley, "you don't have to tell my fortune, just my present." Even she couldn't object to that. "I'll have a word with her if you like," she added magnanimously. Cotwell brightened. "Oh, do you know her?" he said. "Yes, but sometimes I think not very well." Cotwell sighed and burrowed around in debris on the table, dislodging cascades of elderly plates and the long mummified remains of several meals. Eventually, he unearthed a fat leather wallet stuck to a cheese slice. Well, he said doubtfully, these are Qa'Rajh cards, distilled wisdom of the ancients and all that. Or there's the Ching Ling of the Hoplandish. It's all the rage in the smart set. I don't do tea leaves. I'll try the Ching thing. You throw these yarrow stalks into the air then? She did. They looked at ensuing pattern. Said Cudwell after a while. Well, that's one in the fireplace, one in a cocoa-mark, and one in the street, shame about the window, one on the table, and one... nope, two behind the dresser. I expect Mrs. Newton will be able to find the rest. You didn't say how hard. Shall I do it again? No, I don't think so. Cudwell thumbed through the pages of a yellowed book that had previously been supporting the table leg. The pattern seemed to make sense. Yes, here we are, octogram 8887. Illegality, the unatoning goose, which we cross-reference here. Hold on. Yes, got it. Well, without verticality, wisely the cochineal emperor goes forth at tea time. At evening, the mollusks is silent among the almond blossom. Yes, said Keeley, respectfully. And what does that mean? Well, unless you're a mollusk, probably not a lot, said Codwell. I think perhaps it lost something in translation. Are you sure you know how to do this? Let's try the cards, said Codwell hurriedly, fanning them out. Pick a card, any card. It's death, said Keeley. Ah, well, of course. The death card doesn't actually mean death in all circumstances, Codwell said quickly. You mean it doesn't mean death in those circumstances where the subject is getting overexcited and you're too embarrassed to tell the truth, Look. Take another card. Oh, this one's death as well, said Keeley. Did you put the other one back? No. Shall I take another card? May as well. Well, there's a coincidence. Death number 3. Right, is this a special pack for conjuring tricks? Keeley tried to sound composed, but even she could detect a faint tingle of hysteria in her voice. Codwell frowned at her and carefully put the cards back in the pack, shuffled it and dealt them out on the table. There was only one death. Oh, dear, he said. I think this is going to be serious. May I see the palm of your hand, please? He examined it for a long time. After a while, he went to the dresser, took a jeweler's eyeglass out of a drawer, wiped the porridge off of it with the sleeve of his robe, and spent another few minutes examining her hand in the minutest of detail. Eventually, he sat back, removed the glass, and stared at her. You're dead, he said. Keeley waited. She couldn't think of any suitable reply. I'm not lacked a certain style, while is it serious seemed somehow too frivolous. Did I say I thought this was going to be serious? Said Codwell. I think you did, said Keeley carefully, keeping her tone totally level. Well, I was right. Oh, it could be fatal. How much more fatal, said Keeley, than being dead? I did mean for you. Something very fundamental seems to have gone wrong, you see. You're dead in every sense, but the, actual way. I mean, the cards think you're dead, your lifelines thinks you're dead, everything and everyone thinks you're dead. I don't, said Keeley, but her voice was less than confident now. I'm afraid your opinion doesn't count here, but people can see and hear me. The first thing you learn when you enroll at the Unseen University, I'm afraid, is that people don't pay much attention to that sort of thing. It's what their minds tells them that's important. You mean people don't see me because their minds tell them not to? Afraid so. It's called predestination or something like that. Codwell looked at her wretchedly. I'm a wizard. We know these things. Actually, it's not the first thing you learned when you enroll, he added. I mean, you learn where the lavatories are and all that sort of thing before that, but after all that, it is the first thing. You can see me, though. Wizards are specially trained to see things that are there and not to see things that aren't. You get special exercises. Keeley drummed her fingers on the table, or tried to. It turned out to be difficult. She stared down in vague horror. Codwell hurried forward and wiped the table with his sleeve. Sorry, he muttered. I had treacle sandwiches for supper last night. What can I do? Nothing. Nothing? Well, you could certainly become a very successful burglar. Sorry, that was kind of tasteless of me. I thought so. Codwell patted ineptly her on the hand, and Keeley was too preoccupied to even notice such a fragrant lèse majesté. You see, everything is fixed. History is all worked out from start to finish, where what all the facts actually are is beside the point. History just rolls straight over the top of them. You can't change anything because the changes are already a part of it. You're dead. It's fated. You'll just have to accept it. He gave her an apologetic grin. You're a lot luckier than most dead people, if you look at it objectively, he said. You're alive to enjoy it. I don't want to accept it. Why should I accept it? It is not my fault. You don't understand. History is moving on. You can't get involved in it anymore. There isn't a part in it for you, don't you see? Best to let things take their course. He patted her hand again. She looked at him. He withdrew his hand. What am I supposed to do then? She said. Not eat, because the food wasn't destined to be eaten by me? Go and live in the crypt somewhere? A bit of a poser, isn't it? Agreed Codwell. That's fate for you. I'm afraid if the world can't sense you, you don't exist. I'm a wizard, Don't say it. Qa'Rajh stood up. 5 generations ago, one of her ancestors had halted his band of nomadic cutthroats a few miles from the mound of Stolat, and had regarded the sleeping city with a peculiarly determined expression that said, "This will do." Just because you are born in the saddle doesn't mean you have to die in the bloody thing. Strangely enough, many of his distinctive features had, by a trick of heredity, been bequeathed to his descendant, accounting for her rather idiosyncratic attractiveness, although not the droopy mustache and round furry hat with the spike on top of it. They were never more apparent than now. Even Codwell was impressed. When it came to determination, you could have cracked rocks on her jaw. In exactly the same tone of voice that her ancestor had used when he addressed his weary, sweaty followers before the attack, this speech was passed on later to generations in an epic poem commissioned by his son, who wasn't born in a saddle and could eat with a knife and fork. It began, "See yonder the stolid foeman slumber, fat with stolen gold, corrupt of mind. Let the spears of your wrath be as the step on fire on a windy day in the dry season. Let your honest blade thrust like the horns of a 5-year-old yak with severe toothache." And then went on for 3 hours. Reality, which can't usually afford to pay poets, records that in fact the entire speech ran, "Lads, most of them are still in bed. We should go through them like the sack fruit through a short grandmother. And I, for one, have had it right up to here with yurts, okay?" No, I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to dwindle into some sort of ghost. You are going to help me, wizard. Codwell's subconscious recognized that tone. It had harmonics in it that made even the woodworms in the floorboards stop what they were doing and stand to attention. It wasn't voicing an opinion. It was saying, "Things will be thus." "Me, madam," he quavered. "I don't see what I can possibly—" He was jerked off his chair and out into the street, his robes billowing around him. Qa'Rajh marched towards the palace, with her shoulders set determinedly, dragging the wizard behind her like a reluctant puppy. It was with such a walk that mothers used to bear down on the local school when their little boy came home with a black eye. It was unstoppable, like the march of time itself. What is it you intended?" Codwell stuttered, horribly aware that there was going to be nothing he could do to resist, whatever it was. "It's your lucky day, wizard." "Oh, good," he said weakly. "You've just been appointed Royal Recognizer." "Oh, what does that entail exactly?" "You're going to remind everyone that I am alive. It's very simple. There's 3 square meals a day, and your laundry done. Step lively, man." "Royal? You're a wizard. I think that's something you ought to know," said the princess. "There is," said Death. This was a cinematic trick adapted for print. Death wasn't talking to the princess. He was actually in his study, talking to Mort. But it was quite effective, wasn't it? It's probably called a fast dissolve or crosscut or zoom or something. An industry where a senior technician is called a best boy might call it anything. "And what's that?" he added, winding a bit of black silk around a wicket hook in a little vise he'd clamped to his desk. Mort hesitated. Most of this was because of fear and embarrassment, but it was also because the sight of the hooded spectre peacefully trying dry flies was enough to make anyone pause. Besides, Isabel was sitting on the other side of the room, ostensibly doing some needlework, but also watching him through a cloud of sullen disapproval. He could feel her red-rimmed eyes boring into the back of his neck. Death inserted a few crow hackles and whistled a busy little tune through his teeth, not having anything else to whistle through. He looked up. They didn't go exactly as smoothly as I thought, said Mort, standing nervously on the carpet in front of the desk. You had trouble, said Death, snipping off a few scraps of feather. Well, you see, the witch wouldn't come away. The monk, well, he started out all over again. There's nothing to worry about there, lad. Mort. You should have worked out by now that everyone gets what they think is coming to them. It's so much neater that way. I know, sir, but that means bad people who think they're going to some sort of paradise actually do get there, and good people who fear they're going to some kind of horrible place actually really suffer. It doesn't seem like justice. What is it I've said you must remember when you're out on duty? Well, you... Mort stuttered into silence. There is no justice, there is just you. Well, You must remember that. Yes, but I expect it all works out properly in the end. I have never met the Creator, but I'm told he's quite kindly disposed to people. Death snapped the thread and started to unwind the vice. Put such thoughts out of your mind, he added. At least the third one shouldn't have given you any trouble. This was the moment. Mort had thought about it for a very long time. There was no sense in concealing it. He'd upset the whole future course of history. Such things tend to draw themselves to people's attention. Best to get it off of his chest. Own up like a man, take his medicine, cards on the table, beating about the bush, none off. Mercy, throw himself on it. The piercing blue eyes glittered at him. He looked back like a nocturnal rabbit trying to outstare the headlights of a 16-wheeled Arctic, whose driver is a 12-hour caffeine freak outrunning the tachometers of hell. He failed. No, sir, he said. Good. Well done. Now then, what do you think of this? Anglers reckon that a good dry fly should cunningly mimic the real thing. There are the right flies for morning, there are different flies for the evening rise, and so on. But the thing between Death's triumphant digits was a fly from the dawn of time. It was the fly in the primordial soup. It had bred on mammoth turds. It wasn't a fly that bangs on window panes. It was a fly that drills through walls. It was an insect that would crawl out from between the slats of the heaviest swat, dripping venom and seeking revenge. Strange wings and dangling bits stuck out all over it. It seemed also to have a lot of teeth. What's it called? Said Mort. I shall call it Death's Glory. Death gave the thing a final admiring glance and stuck it into the hood of his robe. I feel inclined to see a little bit of life this evening, he said. You can take the duty, now that you've got the hang of it, as it were. Yes, sir, said Mort mournfully. He saw his life stretching out in front of him like a nasty black tunnel with no light at the end of it. Death drummed his finger on the desk and muttered to himself. Ah, yes, he said. Albert tells me someone's been meddling in the library. Pardon, sir. Taking books out, leaving them lying abound. Books about young women. He seems to think it amusing. As has already been revealed, the holy listeners have such well-developed hearing that they can be deafened by a good sunset. Just for a few seconds, it seemed to Mort that the skin on the back of his neck was developing similar strange kind of powers, because he could see Isabel freeze mid-stretch. He also heard the little intake of breath that he'd heard before among the shelves. He remembered the lace handkerchief. Yes, sir, it won't happen again, he said. The skin on the back of his neck started to itch like fury. Splendid! Now you two can run along. Get Albert to do your picnic lunch or something. Get some fresh air. I've noticed the way you two always avoid each other. He gave Mort a conspiratorial nudge. It was like being poked with a stick, and added, Albert's told me what that means. Has he? Said Mort gloomily. He'd been wrong. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it turned out to be a flamethrower. Death gave him another of his supernova winks. Mort did not return it. Instead he turned, plodded towards the door at a general speed and gait that made Great Atwin look like a spring lamp. He was halfway along the corridor before he heard the soft rush of footsteps behind him, and a hand caught his arm. Mort. He turned and gazed at Isabel through a fog of depression. Why did you let him think it was you in the library? I don't know, said Mort. It was very kind of you, she said cautiously. Was it? I can't think what came over me. He felt in his pocket and produced a handkerchief. This belongs to you, I think. Thank you. She blew her nose noisily. Mort was already well down the corridor, his shoulders hunched like a vulture's wings. She ran after him. I say, she said. What? I wanted to say thank you. It doesn't matter, he muttered. It'd just be best if you don't take books away again. It upsets them. Or something. He gave what he considered to be a mirthless laugh. Ha! Ha, what? Just ha! He reached the end of the corridor. There was a door into the kitchen where Albert would be leering knowingly, and Mort decided he couldn't face that. He stopped. But I only took the books for a bit of company, she said behind him. He gave in. We could have a walk in the garden, he said in despair, and then managed to harden his heart just a little, and added, without obligation, that is. You mean you're not going to marry me, she said. Mort was horrified. Marry? Isn't that what Father brought you here for, she said. He doesn't need an apprentice after all. You mean all those nudges and winks and little comments about someday my son, all this will be yours? Said Mort. I tried to ignore them. I don't want to get married to anyone yet, he added, suppressing a fleeting mental picture of the princess. And certainly not to you. No offense meant. I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man on the disc, she said sweetly. Mort was hurt by this. It was one thing to not want to marry someone, but quite another to be told that he didn't want to marry you. At least I don't look like I've been eating donuts in a wardrobe for years, he said, as they stepped out on Death's black lawn. At least I walk as if my legs only had one knee each, she said. My eyes aren't two juggly poached eggs. Isabel nodded. On the other hand, my ears don't look like something growing out of a dead tree. What does juggly mean? You know, eggs like Albert does them. With all the white all sticky and runny and full of slimy bits? Yes. A good word, she conceded thoughtfully. But my hair, I put it on you, doesn't look like something you clean a privy with. Certainly, but neither does mine look like a wet hedgehog. Pray note that my chest does not appear to be a toast rag in a wet paper bag. Mort glanced sideways at the top of Isabel's dress, which contained enough puppy fat for 2 litters of Rottweilers, and forebore to comment. My eyebrows don't look like a pair of amazing caterpillars, he hazarded. True, but my legs, I suggest, could at least stop a pig in a passageway. Sorry? They're not bandy, she explained. Ah. They strolled through the lily beds, temporarily lost for words. Eventually, Isabel confronted Mort and stuck out her hand. He shook it in thankful silence. Enough, she said. Just about. Good. Obviously we shouldn't get married, if only for the sake of the children. Mort nodded. They sat down on a stone seat between some neatly clipped box hedges. Death had made a pond in this corner of the garden, fed by an icy spring that appeared to be vomited into the pool by a stone lion. Fat white carp lurked in the depth, or nosed on the surface like velvety black water lilies. We should have brought some breadcrumbs, said Mort gallantly, opting for a totally non-controversial subject. He never comes out here, you know, said Isabel, watching the fish. He made it to keep me amused. It didn't work. It's not real, she said. Nothing's real here, not really real. He just likes to act a human being. He's really trying hard at the moment, have you noticed? I think you're having an effect on him. Did you know he tried to learn the banjo once? I see him more of the organ type. He couldn't get the hang of it, said Isabel, ignoring him. He can't create, you see. He says he created the pool. It's a copy of one he saw somewhere. Everything's a copy. Mort shifted uneasily. Some small insect had crawled up his leg. It's rather sad, he said, hoping that this was approximately the right tone to adopt. Yes. She scooped a handful of gravel from the path and began to flick it absent-mindedly into the pool. Are my eyebrows that bad? She said. Said Mort. Afraid so. Oh. Flick, flick. The carp were watching her disdainfully. And my legs, he said. Yeah, sorry. Mort shuffled anxiously through his limited repertoire of small talk and finally gave up. Never mind, he said gallantly. At least you can use tweezers. He's very kind, said Isabel, ignoring his words, in a sort of absent-minded way. He's not exactly your real father, is he? No. My parents were killed crossing the Great Neff years ago. There was a storm, I think. He found me and brought me here. I don't know why he did it. Perhaps he felt sorry for you. He never feels anything. I don't mean that nastily, you understand. It's just that he's got nothing to feel with. No, no glance. He probably thought sorry for me. She turned her pale, round face towards Mort. I won't hear a word against him. He tries to do his best. It's just, he's always got so much to think about. My father was a bit like that. I mean. I expect he's got glands, though. I imagine he has, said Mort, shifting uneasily. It's not something I've ever really thought about. Glands, that is. They stared by the side at a trout. The trout stared back. I've just upset the entire history of the future, said Mort. Yes? You see, when I tried to kill her, I killed him, but the thing is, according to history, she should have died and the Duke would be king, but the worst bit is that although he is absolutely rotten to the core, he'd unite the cities, and eventually there'd be a federation, and all the books say there'll be 100 years of peace and plenty, I mean. You think there'd be a reign of terror or something, but apparently history needs this kind of person sometimes, and the princess would be just another monarch. I mean, not bad, quite good, really, but just not right, and now it's not going to happen, and history is flapping around loose, and it's all my fault. He subsided, anxiously waiting her reply. You were right, you know. I was? We ought to have bought some breadcrumbs, she said. I suppose they find things to eat in the water, beetles and so on. Did you hear what I said? What about? Oh, nothing. Nothing much, really. Sorry. Isabel sighed and stood up. I expect you'll be wanting to get off, she said. I'm glad we got this marriage business sorted out. It was quite nice talking to you. We could have a sort of hate-hate relationship, said Mort. I don't normally get to talk with the people my father works with. She appeared to be unable to draw herself away, as though she was waiting for Mort to say something else. Well, you wouldn't, was all he could think of. I expect you got to go off to work now. More or less, Mort hesitated, aware that in some indefinable way the conversation had drifted out of the shallows and was now floating over some deep bits that he did not quite understand. There was a noise like... It made Mort recall the old yard at home with a pang of homesickness. During the harsh, ram-top winters, the family kept a hardy mountain tharga beasts in the yard, chucking in straw as necessary. After the spring thaw, the yard was several feet deep and had quite a solid crust on it. You could walk across it if you were careful. If you weren't, you sank knee-deep in concentrated gippo, and then the sound of your boot made as it came out green and steaming was as much the sound of the turning year as bird song and bee buzz. It was that noise. Mort instinctively examined his shoes. Isabel was crying, not little ladylike sobs, but great yawning gulps like bubbles from an underwater volcano fighting one another to be the first to pop to the surface. There were sobs, escaping under pressure, matured in humdrum misery. Mort finally said, Her body was shaking like a waterbed in an earthquake zone. She fumbled urgently in her sleeves for the handkerchief, but it was no more use in the circumstances than a paper hat in a thunderstorm. She tried to say something which became a stream of consonants punctuated by sobs. Mort said, how old do you think I am? 15, he hazarded. I'm 16, she wailed. And do you know how long I've been 16 for? I'm sorry, I don't No, you wouldn't. No one would. She blew her nose again, and despite her shaking hands, nevertheless carefully tucked the now rather damp hanky back up into her sleeve. You're allowed out, she said. You haven't been here long enough to notice. Time stands still here. Haven't you noticed? Something passes, but it's not real time. He can't create real time. Oh. When she spoke again, it was in the thin, careful, and above all brave voice of someone who has pulled themselves together despite overwhelming odds, but might let go again at any moment. I've been 16 for 35 years. Oh. It was bad enough the first year. Mort looked back at his last few weeks and nodded in sympathy. Is that why you've been reading all those books? He said. Isabel looked down and twiddled a sandaled toe in the gravel in an embarrassed fashion. They're very romantic, she said. There's some really lovely stories. There was this girl who drank poison when her young man had died, and there was one who jumped off a cliff because her father insisted she should marry this old man, and another one who drowned herself rather than submit to... Mort listened in astonishment. To judge by Isabel's careful choice of reading matter, it was a matter of note for any disc female to survive adolescence long enough to wear out a pair of stockings. And then she thought he was dead and she killed herself, and then he woke up and so he did kill himself, and then there was this girl. Common sense suggested that at least a few women reached their third decade without killing themselves for love, but common sense didn't seem to get even a walk-on part in these dramas. The disc's greatest lovers were undoubtedly Milius and Gretalina, whose pure, passionate and soul-searing affair would have scorched the pages of history if they had not, because of some unexplained quirk of fate, been born 200 years apart on different continents. However, the gods took pity on them and turned him into an ironing board, and her into a small brass bollard. When you're God, you don't need to have reasons. Mort was already aware that love made you feel hot and cold and cruel and weak, but he hadn't realized it could also make you stupid. Swam the river every night, but one night there was this storm, and when he didn't arrive, Mort felt instinctively like that some couples met at, say, a village dance and hit it off, went out together for a year or two, had a few rows, made up, got married, and didn't kill themselves at all. He became aware that the litany of star-crossed love had wound down. "Oh," he said, rather weakly, "doesn't anyone just, get along anymore?" "To love is to suffer," said Isabel. There's got to be lots of dark passion." "Has there?" "Absolutely. And anguish." Isabel appeared to recall something. "Did you say something about something flapping around loose?" she said in a tight voice, of someone pulling themselves together. Mort considered. "No," he said. "I'm afraid I wasn't paying much attention. It doesn't matter at all." They strolled back to the house in silence. When Mort went back to the study, he found that Death had gone, leaving 4 hourglasses on the desk. The big leather book was lying on a lantern, securely locked shut. There was a note tucked under the glasses. Mort had imagined that Death's handwriting would be either Gothic or else tombstone angular, but Death had in fact studied classic work on graphology before selecting a style, and had adopted a hand that indicated a balanced, well-adjusted personality. It said, "Gone fishing. There is an execution in Serdopolis, a natural in Krull, a fatal fall in the Carrick Mountains, an egg in El Quinte, the rest of the day, sure own."